Hello, this is Matt.
Kosei.
Mark.
Guillaume.
James.
Mel. Zach.
This is David.
This is PSG Talking.
Le seul podcast sur le PSG en anglais.
Hello and welcome to another episode of PSG Talking. I'm your host, Ed. And today we're going to be talking about PSG. We're going to be recording an episode, I think for the first time, with PSG down in the basement of Ligue 1 in 15th place. It's been a rough start to the season, and joining me to talk about everything that's happened on the pitch and off the pitch, we have James and Matt. So let's get the pleasantries out of the way before we dive into everything. James, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a while.
It has, yeah.
On the podcast, but I've returned in the midst of chaos.
And Matt, how are you over there in the UK?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, pretty good. Also ready to join the agent of chaos in this discussion of PSG's recent troubles.
Yeah, it's been kind of nuts since last month. We were in the Champions League final. Everyone was optimistic about this team. We lost to Bayern Munich, obviously. We thought, okay, let's build, towards next season. And then we start with the 1-0 loss to Lens, and then the 1-0 loss to Marseille. And so we won't need to go, game by game, really. But overall, looking at those first two losses of the season, how concerned are you with those two losses? We did rebound against Metz with that last second goal from Draxler. But James, overall, is this kind of what you expected to start the season? A little bit of a slow start, or is this indicative of something more going on under the scenes here? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think you have to look at both sides of it, right? Because I don't think it's a one or the other situation. I tweeted something a few weeks ago where I said that you might see this Champions League kind of hangover just as a result of coming out of what was one of the greatest title runs that this club has ever seen. And the best clubs have the ability to kind of snap back into focus and get themselves back on track and get right into the next season. I understand that COVID plays a very significant role in this year as well as this season. And so you're dealing with that and the ramifications of it. There were quite a few players that wanted to take some time off after, a well-deserved run, but as a result, did things the wrong way. And a bunch of players ended up with COVID. I think like half the team, right? Like half the starters or something like that. Yeah. And so you're dealing with the effects of coming out of this Champions League season, going on this unprecedented run, and now having to jump back into the league when you've literally lost your captain. You've lost one of the best stars that you have in Kylian Mbappe as a result of COVID. And then things start to just snowball. I'm sure we'll get to, from a managerial and personnel perspective, what's going on. But just in totality, I kind of expected this. I think the stuff with Marseille we'll get into as well, but that's a different circumstance. From a bird's eye view, I kind of expected this. But the real question, I think, is how do you then recover?
That's a good point. How do we recover? Matt, were you kind of expecting this, or are you a little bit more concerned about this slow start?
I'd say that I'm kind of quite relaxed about it as well. It's not ideal, is it? I think the problem with PSG is that the tendency is always to lurch from like one extreme to the other. So like we're amazing one week when we make the Champions League final and everything's looking up, and then suddenly 2 defeats and like maybe the manager needs to be fired and everything's doom and gloom and blah blah. So I think like you saw at the end of the Mets game that the squad are out on their feet, like for various reasons, like obviously like James was just saying. And I don't know. I just think it's kind of normal to have a bit of a hangover. It's such an unusual situation. I don't think we can expect too much of them. So I am disappointed. I think like particularly the sort of the first game, the Lens game, was just a bit of a damp squib. I think we can get into obviously the details of it, but I think at the weekend it wasn't obviously it's annoying to lose to them, but I don't think it was the end of the world the way the actual game went. And then the one on midweek, I mean, I just think it was a bit of a nothing game as well. So I think it's always likely to take a bit of a while to get back into the rhythm of things. It's just such an unusual situation. So we'll see how it pans out, but I think it's a bit early to press the panic button just yet.
So no one was concerned in, what is it, 1, 2, 3, if you go back to the Bayern Munich game, 4 games total, 1 goal scored. No one's too concerned about that?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of that being an issue, I guess my resolve around this team is that the problems that we knew were problems were the same problems that we had before we made the Champions League run, which were issues with fullbacks, issues with the midfield, reliance on superstars. And we've exceeded expectations, and those issues got pushed to the back burner until we ran into a wall, which is Bayern Munich. And they literally exposed us. And then those issues began to bubble up to the surface. Like, if we won the Champions League, I don't know that we're having a conversation as dire as it's been in the PSG landscape around the things that we need to do. Do we need to get rid of the manager? What needs to transpire? We would all be reveling in this, dreamscape, finally achieving that final pillar in this whole narrative. But because we didn't win, all of those things come to the surface, and rightfully so. And so we just have to put everything into context. The problems that we've had already have been the problems that we've been seeing for the last few seasons.
That's a good point, Matt. The lack of goals, the results are what it are, but I mean, on the pitch, it doesn't seem to be clicking. Is there any concern over the lack of goals? I mean, this season, Draxler is the only one who scored. I don't think you want Draxler being your leading scorer if you have any ambitions of doing anything in any given year.
Well, I mean, especially as Leonardo, I assume, is, on WhatsApp right now, with a big picture of Draxler with a for sale sign around his neck, trying to, sending it to all his contacts. It's not a healthy situation. I mean, it's not ideal, is it, either? No, but again, I think it feels like it's just been such a fragmented sort of transition between last season and this season. There was barely a break at all, was there? And I think that once they get back into a more normal rhythm of things, I think that Champions League was such an unusual situation because of the sort of mini tournament, mini tournament format of it. So I think when we're in that, it's literally just about winning the next game and not worrying too much about the quality of performance, right? It was just, the thing was getting to the final or trying to win it. Now it's back to Ligue, it's back to the sort of the more rhythmic sort of league and cup sort of situation, and I think the players just need to get back. They need to sort of just get back into find their rhythm, and I think the goals will come. I think it's not I think the players we've got in our squad, what they've shown, how they've shown they can perform in the past. I think the ridiculous amount of goals they scored last season. I mean, it's just normal to have these little dips. You just have to sort of try and not get too caught up in these sort of results of it, I think, because I think that if we were firing on all cylinders, if we'd been playing well, if we'd had a sort of nice rhythm of games and we'd had the same team week after week, I think in that Marseille game, certainly we created enough chances that normally at least one of them would have gone in. So I'm not too worried. Obviously, it is a concern and you do want it to turn around, but I think there's still time to do that and it's still early days.
It's a long time since that 9-0 win over Le Havre back in July when we had that friendly. Would love to see 9 goals scored. But, the game you kind of mentioned against Lens was kind of, first game of the season, a lot of players out with COVID. We could kind of breeze over that. If there's anything out of the game you guys want to talk about, but really everyone wants to hear about the Marseille match and what happened in there. I mean, this was a game, you had 5 red cards, 10 yellow cards. Talk a little bit about, let's just start with the referee, Jerome Brassard. Does the French league have an issue with officials? We've seen other games where they're just throwing players out left and right. Is there an issue with the officials, and does PSG bear some of the blame here, getting into a fight, not keeping a cool head? We can go with James. Anything to say about just the rough nature of that game? I mean, it was kind of what you expected with a rival, but I mean, that kind of went overboard to like rugby, American football level. I mean, it was really not it wasn't a football game that I was used to watching. It was really ugly.
Yeah, it was all over the place. It got to the point where like no one was playing football, right? They were out trying to harm each other. And I think as soon as Paredes came in the game, I said, oh, he's going to go and hurt someone because that is his job. His job is to protect Neymar and then like somewhere down the line play some semblance of football. But he's the enforcer. And when I saw his introduction to the game, I already knew what time it was. And he might have been in the game for like 3 minutes before he got a card. So he did his job. But in all seriousness, I kind of expect a very aggressive and rough game as it pertains to the rivalry between these two clubs. But where it kind of spills over is like everything that, I'm sure we're going to get to, where I have a problem, right? And that also includes the ref. And I think Leonardo even mentioned, this game is too important for a young ref to be officiating. And I agree. But we have seen refereeing in Ligue being an issue for some time now. I think as much as we love our new right back, he was almost, introduced in almost trial by fire, where he experienced the roughness and the full contact that is known as Ligue 1. And you could almost see in his face after he didn't get a few calls that he was kind of like, holy cow, okay, this is how they play here. And it's something that is a concern because you have players who are superstars like Mbappe, where, you kind of have to rationalize in your brain, like how long are they going to take this level of contact and abuse? And this is something that Neymar had to learn and then refine in his game because he is a very flair player. And that doesn't fly in this league. And the players on the opposite team don't like it, nor do the refs, nor do the, officials. And it is something that has kind of held this league back, is that they do not protect their superstars at all, at all. And that's why everyone ends up leaving. And so it is something that we have to take into context. Like the refs can only do but so much, but they're empowered by someone larger. And sometimes we point our ire at the people on the field, but it's really the people in the stands who call the shots. And that's something that, translates as in terms of the play on the field, but also how the game is called. And we saw that rear its head in what happened between Neymar and Álvaro González as well. All right.
Yeah, those are all great points. And Matt, this isn't anything new. I mean, if you go back years ago with Zlatan, does France not deserve PSG?
Yeah. Good old Zlatan.
Yeah.
We should come back.
He should.
Just for a little while, yeah. I know it's a bit of a tricky one. I have to say, because I come from sort of more of an English football tradition where it's a bit more, I watch a lot of lower league football and it's a bit more sort of agricultural. There's a bit more of the sort of stuff that we saw on Sunday night. So I don't mind it too much. I kind of think it's part and parcel of a big rivalry that you have that needle, and commentators always say, we don't like to see this sort of thing, but I actually do quite like to see it. I think that obviously not the whole Neymar racism incident, which was obviously quite horrible, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a minute. And I think it went a bit far, and I see what Leonardo means about the referee, but at the same time, I mean, it's not like there's loads of great referees in France, is it? Let's be honest, because he was like, maybe they should have put Turpin in charge instead. And I'm like, well, but he's terrible as well. He's got a bit better recently, but we've had loads of horror shows with him in the past. So that's just one that I don't really like to talk about referees too much, because I think you just have to play the situation you're in. And I think if we're going to get serious about it, I think that the PSG players need to rise above it a bit. I think I think Neymar possibly hadn't mitigating circumstances, but I think a lot of the others just got sucked into it. I think Villas-Boas has set his Marseille team up to do this against us before, where they just try and basically fight us all the time. And so we knew what was coming, and you just have to try and rise above it. But I think they all get a bit caught up in the sort of derby atmosphere, even though there wasn't much for crowd in, and they sort of get a bit carried away. So it was a bit unfortunate, because I think ultimately it suited Marseille to play that game where it was it was very disjointed, very niggly, very stop-start, because they wanted to spoil it. They wanted to keep it 0-0 and maybe get a goal like they did, and then cling on to that. Whereas we probably would have been better served to stay calm, rise above it, and try and play our normal game. But it didn't really turn out like that, did it?
Yeah, they definitely. I mean, they already kind of had an advantage. Mbappe wasn't on the pitch, and then you get under their skin a little bit. You play more aggressive, and that's how, especially with the other French teams, that's how you beat PSG. The catalyst for a lot of what we saw there in stoppage time with 5 red cards and people being sent off was the whole incident with Neymar, with Álvaro González, where Neymar accused him of racially abusing him. And so that's where I want to go next. And when it happened, Neymar, you could tell in his face, he heard something. He was like, what did you say? What did you say? And then he went and told the 4th official, and nothing happened, really. I mean, they just kept playing on, and you could just see it from that incident. It was just bubbling the whole time. And so, Neymar ended up smacking him in the back of the head, and he got 2 games, and I guess there's an investigation to see, but people have been poring over footage to see, almost like the Zapruder film, trying to see, did he say this? Can you read his lips? And James, I want to ask you, what is your assessment of that whole situation? What should be done if there is no evidence to be found? Do you think Gonzalez can and should be punished at all?
I think mulling over footage of what someone said, while we might look at that and say, well, they just want to get to the bottom of what happened and get all the facts. That's not necessarily the case, because it could swing the other way, where, trying to find something could also lead to them saying, well, Neymar did this, so the 2 things cancel each other out, so don't worry about it. Nobody's at fault. And so I'm kind of leery about checking the footage. Additionally, I think the president of French football said something like, oh, there's no racism in our league. So, you're inside of a system where the top point person has this belief. And so do you have to wonder how or why the players would stoop to those kinds of levels to gain a psychological edge in someone's brain? I look at the Neymar situation, and anybody black that saw that kind of situation, like, Neymar's at work. And if you are black and you are at work, there's a certain decorum that you need to have in those types of situations where you might just want to go and knock that person out. You can't do that. And Neymar knew that, which is why the moment he heard it, he approached him and asked, what did you say? And immediately made a beeline to an official. He had the wherewithal to do that, as many of us would have done the same thing in that situation. That's how I know the guy said something, because your natural response in that situation, in any other time, is to knock that person out for saying something that disrespectful to you. And the fact that Álvaro was empowered to do so and knew that he could get away with it, you can say like, oh, well, we don't know if he's racist. He's certainly not making a good case for him not being racist. Like, that's almost like if you're on trial for murder and someone accuses you of it, you're going to do anything and everything that you can to prove that you are not so. He's not done that. He's kind of like, oh, I have black friends. Like, oh, I didn't really say anything. Like, you're not making a case for yourself. And why is this person, who is a global superstar, whose livelihood could be put on the line by retaliating the way that he probably felt like he should, why would he put that on the line for something that he may have heard you say? We're aware of what he said. There's no, investigation that needs to happen. The question is, how does a league that is supposed to be this multicultural organization with all of these people from different walks of life, race, creeds, religions, etc., how do you then allow something like this to occur where someone can even feel inclined to say something like that? Right? Like, we're not even talking about the punishment. How could someone feel like they are protected in this environment in order to say something like that? Oh, because he knows that nothing's going to happen, which nothing happened, which then, prompted Neymar to then smack him upside the head, because I've done the thing that I'm supposed to do, right? I heard something said to me. It was insulting. I went to the officials. They did absolutely nothing. Okay, well, now it's out of my hands. Because as a man, I cannot allow you to disrespect me at my place of business and say something that derogatory towards me. And so, because of how beloved Neymar is in that locker room, yeah, everybody's fighting. Everyone's getting a red card, which is understood. And so I look at it I take a step back and look at it from a sports, and professionalism perspective of, oh man, everyone, don't let them get into your head. Just focus on the game and beat them that way. But at the same time, if the game itself is not protecting the players, again, then the players are forced to take matters into their own hands. I'm very sure that Neymar already knew no one's going to do anything. And so I'm willing to take that two-game suspension because you're going to have to respect me as a peer and as a professional. And saying things like that, it's not going to fly because you wouldn't say that to me on the street. And so don't say it to me in that professional workspace.
Yeah, that's very well said. And, like you were saying, the protection thing, it's bad enough if you don't protect him on the pitch. Now you're not protecting him when he's racially abused. You could see his reaction. I don't think there's any doubt that something was said to him. I mean, he reacted immediately.
For sure.
Me personally, I would have loved if he just hauled off and just smacked him right in the, punched him right in the face. I also am a big fan of Neymar getting all his teammates and saying, we're walking off the pitch until something's done, Villas-Boas, take your player off or we're forfeiting the game or something. Football can't go on with that kind of stuff, and we see it far too often in leagues across Europe. So it's really unfortunate. But Matt, what is your assessment of what happened, and what do you think should be done? I mean, it's kind of unfair that Neymar's going to be suspended for 2 games and Álvaro may not get anything, if they can't prove what Neymar's saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't have much to add to what James said there. I think that was excellently put. I think the most depressing thing of the whole, which you touched on as well, just the depressing comments of Nola Rat, or however you pronounce it, just dreadful. Like, there's no racism in football. I mean, what's that? I mean, what world is that man in? Like, there's obvious racism in football. There's racism in wider society. I mean, France, there's fairly overt racism in wider society, in my experience. And just to come out with something so sort of trite and obviously nonsense in the wake of a really serious incident, which is probably indicative of why the guy feels sort of empowered to use that kind of slur as a way to get inside his opponent's head, right? So the whole situation is just a bit depressing, and I don't really know what you do about it, to be honest, apart from, like you said, maybe you need to see the players take it into their own hands and maybe be a bit, it's very difficult, I know, but to say, right, we're not going to, we're going to walk off, or we're going to sit down, or we're going to do something and, take some kind of direct action until this is sort of resolved effectively. But I think poring over the footage is a bit of they want to hide into nothing there. I mean, I think it's unlikely you're going to get definitive proof. Yeah. We've seen this in a lot of cases in the Premier League in the past, where they've done these sort of trial by video, and sometimes they get found guilty, sometimes they don't, and when they do, the guilty party was like, oh no, I didn't say, it's not conclusive, and blah blah blah. And I think it will just degenerate into that he said, and people will believe who they want to believe, unfortunately. So I don't know what will happen to the guy, but I think it was fairly obvious. I think Neymar, to be fair to him, sort of seemed to deal with it the right way by, like you were saying, approaching the officials first, and when nothing got done about it, he sort of had to take it into his own hands. He didn't really have a choice to. He
did tweet afterwards. Yeah. He was like, VAR can catch everything, but him saying that, he's like, my only regret is not punching him in the face or something. Yeah. So, and what's interesting is Neymar is the most criticized player in the world. I mean, they talk about his mama, they talk about his sister, they talk about his dad, and he just, it doesn't bother him. He just keeps it moving.
Eats it.
So that's why I'm inclined to believe that what he said, Álvaro said, is exactly what was said to him, because he lost his mind. I think that is clearly his trigger. We all have something that if someone says something to us, that's it. We're not asking questions. That's it. We're going. And clearly that Neymar was triggered by whatever Álvaro said. And also, I mean, I saw on Twitter someone posted an image, I guess, when he was back in the Spanish league, where he was making fun of Messi's height or something like that. So I also feel like he's a little bit of an agitator. And I feel like it's something he would say to get under Neymar's skin. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if he did, okay, so in the hypothetical sense, He didn't say it. Why are you not going out of your way to clarify and explain to Neymar on the pitch what happened? If you didn't say it, I wouldn't want to be accused of being a racist. Why wouldn't you go out of your way to approach the ref? Hey, I didn't say it. This is what I meant. I'm sorry. You know how players do. Let me give you a hug. I apologize. You did none of that.
What did you think of that picture he posted where he got all of his friends on the team to take a picture? I mean, was that just seems like something somebody would do who's guilty? That's what they would do to try to cover their tracks.
It's also like classic racist behaviour, isn't it? It's like, I can't be a racist. I've got loads of black friends. Look at them all standing next to me. Yeah. It's like, and also it was I think it's probably quite instructive that he didn't even say that he didn't do it in that message, that he was just like, blah, blah, racism's wrong, blah, blah. Look, here's all my teammates who love me. And it's like, well, that's not a denial, mate. That's a non-denial denial.
And he also said that Neymar was basically just mad because he lost. And it's like, Neymar just lost the Champions League final. He's lost in the World Cup. Like, he's lost bigger games against Marseille in September.
He's not upset about the Le Classique.
No.
No.
He's not.
You know when he's upset. There's tears flowing. Mm-hmm. He's to himself. And even in those moments, he's on a boat the next week with his friends like nothing happened. The fact that he can turn it on and turn it off like that, I still don't comprehend. But that's what the best players in the world do. So no, he's not upset about you, random person from Marseille.
I've literally never heard of the guy before all of this, so that should tell you something about him. But let's keep it moving. I do want to talk about the Mets game, the only win of the season. The one of the, other than the win and Draxler's goal, the big talking point in this one was, Juan Bernat goes down with a pretty significant knee injury. It's probably going to keep him out months. It's a ACL. We still don't really know, but at the left back, that leaves Kurzawa, who signed that extension to 2024, I believe, and Mitchell Bakker, and I guess Abdou Diallo can play in there. But do any of those players really give you a whole lot of confidence? Matt, do you think left back is some position Leonardo needs to address?
Well, I mean, now, yes, maybe. I mean, well, first of all, we're not going to see Kurzawa again for a while, are we? Because he's got, 6 or 7 game ban or something. So that's like a quarter of the season gone nearly. So that's at least one good thing came out of Sunday's game, because I'm not a fan, as we've discussed before. I mean, I think it's a good chance for Bakker to sort of prove himself. I think we saw in the sort of warm-up games before the Champions League that he's got something about him, but at the same time it's a lot to ask of him to play every game for PSG this season. So yeah, I guess Leonardo is probably going to have to think a bit creatively about what he's going to do in that situation, because I don't think we've got a lot of money to spend, have we? And also there's other things in the squad that really, I mean, we've got the right back hopefully sorted. It was a good debut from Florenzi, but yeah, I mean, ideally you wouldn't want to be getting a third senior left back in when you've got a young one in Bakker as well. So I wonder if there's a loan deal to be done somewhere, but I think the chances of us spending big on the left back are probably quite slim, because there doesn't seem to be that much money in general floating around.
Yeah, that's something you don't hear too often. PSG and not too much money to spend. There was a rumor, Alex Telles, Manchester United interested, and they've apparently agreed to personal terms, but who knows, maybe 20 million, but no one really knows what PSG has to spend. I mean, obviously, like other clubs, they were affected by the coronavirus, and you do have Neymar and Mbappe's wages, but you also had Cavani and Silva's wages go off the book. So who knows how all the finances work? I'm not that smart. But James, what do you think about that left back position? Are you kind of keen on Bakker and Diallo? Can they float the boat for a little while until Bernat gets back? And even if Bernat gets back, is he going to be his normal self? Is he going to be a little shy to really go 100%? Is he going to lose a step? What do you think about the left back position?
I just started staring into space, thinking about all of this. Like, you can't win, Like, 3 weeks ago, we were discussing the fact that we were a few pieces away from putting it all together. Very reminiscent of Liverpool. They lost in the Champions League final, come back the next year, boom, they're right there. Looking at how Bayern's constructed their team, hey, is there an opportunity for us to try to go after some French talent? We know the relationship with the French League and PSG versus the Bundesliga and Bayern, so we can't really draw comparisons there, but we're floating some names around. It's good vibes. Ed's feeling good. Everyone's kind of like hype. There's great energy. And then this happens, right? I think the Kurzawa extension might have been too soon. And it was for too many years. He's gone for 6 games. I think Bernat, I read that maybe we're looking at 6 months, so that brings us around March. So if we're still in the Champions League, he'd be right on time to come back. But then you're talking about jumping right back into a high-pressure situation. I think from what I've seen from Bakker, he's really tall and strong. He can pass. He's pretty good. But, putting that kind of pressure on him, like I have to agree. Putting that kind of pressure on him so soon, I don't know if he, holds up. And in Diallo, I haven't seen enough of a consistent level of play to make a decision there. I don't know. I'm going to have to start judging this team, once we get to the group stage of Champions League, because there's just not a consistent formation or, roster of players right now. We also don't know I read a report that perhaps someone from a left back out of Chelsea might be in play, maybe someone from Juventus. There's a lot of speculation going around. I think for right now, just to get through these next bit of games, Bakker is going to have to be the guy. And let's see what he does. He might surprise us like Juan Bernat surprised us in that same position. We happen to have a bit of luck when it comes to that position. The coronavirus has also done a number on, finances and wages. We still have not figured out that midfield, which it's a blind spot. It's crippling us. And so we'll see. But I'm not sold on Kurzawa. Definitely not sold on Diallo yet. Bakker's going to have to be the guy. I read a report that Leonardo said, I'm not going to buy anyone, for that left back position. So we can rule that out. And I kind of agree with him just because there's other places where we need to plug holes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes you have to get out of this mindset that you always have to buy a player to solve a problem in the squad. Do you know what I mean? Those young players are there for a reason. Like guys like Bakker, he's been with us for a year, 18 months, I think now. And obviously had time to develop and train with the squad. And now he's got 6 games with Kurzawa out to potentially make the left back spot his own and show why he sort of deserves to, keep it while Bernat's out, sort of thing. So I think it's a shame that it's going to have to come at this time where the team's not in good form and, there's other problems, which, is never a good situation to throw a young player into. But you do sometimes just have to trust them and see how they get on. And we've got some evidence that he could do a good job for us. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he can do and whether he can make that spot his own.
My only concern is that I feel like we've got the wrong kind, at least left back. I mean, Bakker's like a big, strong guy, almost like a center back. He's not, look at Bayern Munich with, Davies and Alba and all their players who are much faster. And we've got these big, hulking, slow fullbacks. And, Florenzi did look good. We can talk a little bit about that if you guys want to. But, Diallo and Bakker just are not what you see in this modern game of football with these, pacey fullbacks and getting forward and tracking back and being able to do everything. Yeah. These guys are very much like your typical, probably, Matt, what you see in your lower leagues in England there. Yeah. You probably see a lot of these kinds of players. So
Yeah. Hoofing it down the touchline, looking for maybe winning a throw on or something. Yeah,
the good old days.
The best you can hope for usually at Cambridge. Yeah.
Yeah, and these positions, left back, right back. I mean, that's everyone's looking for an Alphonso Davies. Everybody's looking for players like that, and they're just not out there. And if they are available, they're 80 million or something crazy. And like you said, we just can't afford that right now. So we may just have to go forward until an opportunity presents itself. So talk, James, a little bit about Florenzi in the match against Marseille. I mean, he was pretty much the only bright spot.
Woo!
Yeah.
Finally. finally, I think he did great. In spite of trial by fire, I think we just kind of threw him in there, and he survived, which is a good sign. I was kind of like on the fence. I'm like, all right, he's fine. He's pretty good. And then he swung a ball into the box, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's gonna go out. But he swung the ball into the box, and it landed right in front of Neymar, like on the nose. And then the sun like opened up. There was like rays of light coming down. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, this is what that feels like. I think he's done great. Obviously that's a 1 game sample size, but the fact that he could do it and he was confident, and he displayed with this assuredness that, when you look at the job that Kara did in the Champions League, halfway through the match, he looked like a deer in headlights. And I understand that's not his fault. He's playing out of position. But there's just something to be said about not having to worry about a side of the pitch because you have a lockdown defender that can also put a ball into the box if need be. And that's all we're asking. I think someone said a long time ago on the podcast that, you don't need 11 superstars to win Champions League. That's not a requirement. You just need a few and guys that are really good at what they do. And I think with Florenzi, we might have somebody who's just pretty good at what he does, and that's just enough, especially to complement someone like a Juan Bernat, who's really good. It's just enough. And that might just be what it is that we need, while everyone else is, kind of a superstar. Now, for the midfield, you might need somebody that's a little good. You might need someone. But for that fullback position, we just need somebody to put a ball in the box, and Mbappe can go get it. Neymar can go get it.
Yeah. Icardi.
But it felt good. Yeah. But it felt great to just see someone that competent, on the first touch. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And then, Matt, we're talking about finances and what's available. I believe Florenzi's deal is a loan with an option to buy from Roma. So, and right back is a position that we definitely need. I mean, it's a position I think every supporter is like, we need to sign one. Kara cannot get it done. We saw that against Bayern Munich. So this is a position that is of need, and we get a guy on loan from Roma. So Tell me what you thought about Florenzi, and maybe be realistic with fans. We may not be seeing Milinkovic-Savic or a player like that 80, 100 million. It just might not happen.
Yeah. It seems like it, doesn't it? Which is a bit of a shame, given our sort of our midfield options are sort of dicey at best. But Florenzi, not a guy I knew much about, to be honest, before we signed him. In fact, I'd go so far as to say I'd literally never heard of him before. I was like, oh, PSG are signing this guy tomorrow on loan. I was like, okay. But I was pleasantly surprised. Thought he looked really good. Obviously, he was, one of the main players for Roma who have been quite good in Serie A in recent years. So one can only assume that there's a reason for that. And I think we saw the qualities he can bring, getting up and down the touchline, some good crossing, and really giving us an extra dimension. And I think particularly, like you say, if we're going to have Bakker on the other side, who's maybe not as dynamic and is a bit more of a stopper, then you need someone who can be a bit more adventurous, who can stretch the play a bit, and maybe he can be that guy for us on the right. But certainly a difficult game to come into again, and a team which is not, which is not firing on all cylinders, and is not necessarily the lineup Tuchel would have wanted to field. But I thought he equipped himself well, and hopefully we'll sort of have plenty more to come from him. I think I really liked as well, he went in for a nice crunching tackle quite early on, which I think is always a good way to introduce yourself to a new team and win over some supporters in the derby match.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Lucas Hernandez is a player. There's been some rumblings about him from Bayern Munich. He apparently wants more playing time, wants to get out of there. I think that would be an amazing signing. He's versatile. He can play left back, center back. I guess it's just, what kind of money does he have to spend? Where does he feel like he needs to spend that? And does anyone know how late the window is open? Just now that with everything changes, is it like October sometime? So I think we've got plenty of time to sort it all out. But Leonardo's going to be a busy man. So the last topic I wanted to bring up with you guys is, we've got, Nice on the 20th Reims on the 27th, Angers. Some winnable games here, but we also thought that, Marseille was winnable. But what needs to change? A lot of fans, you guys are on social media, they're calling for Tuchel. Leonardo didn't hire him. Is Tuchel the problem? Is this just a layover? James, what do you think? Is it time for the manager to go? Is it time for a fresh voice in the locker room?
Hey, man, I said if things keep going the way that they are, by the time Tuchel is recovered from his injury, he'll be looking for a new job. I go back and forth about this guy. I think that Tuchel is someone who got PSG to where they needed to be. But I question if he's the guy to get PSG to where they need to go. And those are two different missions. I kind of feel like he can only manage who's available to play. And so that's a thing. But I think we can definitively say now that he is a defensive-minded coach who just happens to have world-class attacking superstars. And because when he doesn't have them on the pitch, we're not doing much. So with that being said, I think you kind of have to look elsewhere, and soon, because there are decisions that are going to be made very soon. There's rumors about Mbappe trying to leave, but those are always rumors about him trying to leave. There's, this disjointedness that you see within the players. And who is going to be the person to step up and get you a goal when Neymar is injured or when Mbappe is on the bench? Who's going to be the person that's going to do it? And we've had these conversations numerous times about possibilities. I think, I read today something about Pochettino saying hey, I'm not I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to PSG. That's false. And so you probably have to look elsewhere in order to achieve your goal. I just don't think that Tuchel is the guy. I think he's hit his ceiling, and I think we're seeing the results of that, even with his post-game commentary of oh, well, we had a bunch of chances. If we would just put those chances in, it would have been great. It's if you put the ball into the hoop, then you score. Duh. But what's the tactic behind that? How do you actually go about achieving it is the goal. And playing a counterattacking football where you're relying heavily on your defense and then you boot it up the field to Mbappe and hope that he does something is not a winning strategy. I even have a problem with Mbappe doing that, as skilled as he is. He doesn't need to be all force and all power at all times. There needs to be a level of skill there. And I think bringing in a different manager will allow him to achieve that next level in his ability, where we can place him with Messi and Ronaldo. So I just think it might be time for a changing of the guard. And that's not a knock on Tuchel. I just don't think that he has the acumen to do what Bayern did, right? Which is nuts. Kudos to him. We faced Bayern. We didn't die. It was one goal, but they had a lot of chances, which is really scary. But I just don't think that I'm seeing what I need to see from him as a manager in order to push this team to that next level, especially with the departure of the captain, of Thiago Silva, and being that voice in that locker room. I don't know that there's a voice there, and I don't know that he's the manager to bring everyone together.
That's a good point. And we saw with Bayern Munich, they fired their manager, bringing a new guy in. They win the Champions League. Is it that easy, Matt? Is it just change the manager and the Champions League is ours?
Football literally is that easy. So we should just do that. We should fire Tuchel. I don't know who Tuchel's assistant is, but make one of those manager, and it will just be we'll just win everything.
I think it's Neymar, actually. I think he's the assistant.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Yeah, Neymar player manager. I would love that. We should do that just for a laugh. We'll get Zlatan back. I just said I wanted Zlatan back. Zlatan player manager. Can you imagine? Mbappe, Zlatan, Neymar. Bosh.
I always thought Matuidi would be a good coach, but he's over here in America at Inter Miami.
Yeah. He'll be feeding Higuain in the literal sense and in the football sense. Anyway, so what were we talking about? Oh yeah, the Tuchel. I'm really, really torn on this. I don't really know what I think, to be honest, which I know is not why people are listening. They want some insights, so I'm going to try and deliver some. I think that changing the manager is not necessarily the magic bullet to success. I think that we've seen before with PSG. I think we were all a bit like when Laurent Blanc was manager, oh, we could do better than him. Like, he's taken us as far as we could. We need a change. And then we ended up with Emery and made things worse. So I think you can't say that Tuchel is not a factor in us like reaching the Champions League and the Champions League final. And as a result of that, I don't think that you can sort of just write him off and say, all right, it's time to go, mate. At the same time, I don't think it's an ideal situation that we have a sporting director who is very opinionated and very powerful at the club and has a coach who he didn't pick and who he clearly doesn't see eye to eye with on transfers and I'd assume playing style. I mean, I don't know, but I think certainly in terms of the recruitment, you quite often see Leonardo saying stuff and then Tuchel in his press conference will say something different, like, oh, I want to keep you promoting, or, you know, maybe we should give Thiago Silva a new contract, when clearly Leonardo decided Silva's time was over. So I think in that respect, I can see the case for firing Tuchel, but I don't think that the options that are out there are necessarily going to make us that much better. And I think we have to be realistic about the sort of manager we're going to get as well, while we have Neymar and Mbappe in the squad, because I think it would be nice to think that we'd get one of those managers who can impose themselves on the team and can get us playing a very distinct style. But I think typically when you have those big superstars in the team, you usually need some kind of more of a sort of, you know, just a manager coach, someone who keeps the locker room ticking over, more along the lines of like what Zidane does at Real Madrid, where he's not particularly tactical. He doesn't have a great style which he's trying to impose on football, but he kept that squad ticking over with Ronaldo and Bale and all those guys, and won a load of Champions Leagues just through sort of keeping it happy and letting them do their thing. And I kind of think that's what Tuchel tries to do with us. I think he sets up the defence well, and then he kind of lets Mbappe and Neymar do their thing, and you know, most of the time it works, right? So I think if you've got a manager in who's got a very distinct playing style and is going to give them a lot of instructions and overload them with information, then maybe they'd kick back against that and we wouldn't have such a harmonious squad. So I think on balance, I would like to keep Tuchel and give him a bit longer and see what he can do. Like, once the team settles down a bit more, once the Champions League's back, see how we go. But I think I could see why, if I was Leonardo, that I might just push the button and try someone else, someone who I've appointed and my own man. But I think I would prefer us to stick with him for a bit longer and give him a bit more of a chance, even though I'm not, for the reasons you guys have said, I'm not 100% sold on him, but I think that he's done enough to merit a bit longer. Yeah, all good points. And you brought up Leonardo, and this is another thing I've seen from a minority on Twitter, but, you know, is he on thin ice here? I mean, has he built the team? I mean, looking at it right now, we're talking about Mitchell Bakker starting at left back. I mean, has he done enough to build this team to warrant the kind of godlike presence that he has in this club, that a lot of supporters will put him up on this mantle and think that he's just the best sporting director ever? Like, I kind of like him, but then when you really sit down and look at what he's done, has he built a good enough team to remain sporting director and get all the accolades that he receives from fans? Anyone? I mean that's a really, it's a really difficult question. I think the point is that Leonardo's probably not going anywhere because Nasser's got other things on his plate, right? So I don't think he's going to be wanting to change sporting director at this point. And I think that our transfer business has been a bit better since Leonardo's been back. So I think that's probably a positive from his point of view. I think the players we've signed the last however many windows it is, 3 windows, have typically been better. Obviously, the obvious, Neymar and Mbappe accepted, than the rest of the guys we signed while he was away. So I think he has a clear idea of what he wants to do. I think that he's obviously well connected, and I think we probably, I mean, you never know if you could do better, but again, I think it's a big risk if you get rid of him. We saw what happened last time when we went through like a load of clowns as sporting directors, that could easily happen again. So I think, again, I'm happy to trust him at the moment and see what he can do with a few more windows and again, maybe his own coach.
Yeah, I think we're going through this spurt of this kind of downtrend, and yeah, I definitely heard Mark on the other podcast mention kind of rooting out the issue before it becomes something that is unbearable down the line. And I think there's something to be said about that. You just have to figure out what's best long term, and just looking at the writing on the wall, even without the issues that the club is currently facing, I go back to the question of asking myself, is this the person to get you over that hump of Champions League? Because this is what this is all about, right? Getting you over we'll probably win the league. It's not for certain, and it looks bleak right now, but things have a tendency to balance themselves out the longer you play the game. But with that said, are you willing to roll the dice for one more season with this person, knowing what he is capable of? Or do you say we need to start planning for the future, which may also include an Mbappe departure? We have to be realistic about that. We cannot keep both of these superstars on the same team. It is a luxury. And so we have to be realistic. When do we not necessarily abandon this Champions League hope, but start trying to prepare for a future without this global superstar, whether that is in Neymar or Mbappe or both? And how do we proceed in that vein? And who's going to be the person to shepherd those years when it might not be semifinal or finals glory? It might be quarterfinal, but you're building towards something that's a lot better than what we've seen when those superstars are not there. I think we need to consider and start to think about our team in the vein that Liverpool kind of thinks about their club and Bayern thinks about their club. It's just layers of depth. Like Thiago left Bayern and they got Leroy Sané. What the hell? That really happened. And it's just layers on layers of depth. But PSG don't have that. Why? We have to examine that. And Ed, to your point, I think there's something to be said about Leonardo getting that clean slate of being able to build his team his way. And that hasn't necessarily happened yet. He doesn't have his manager there. He doesn't have all of the players that he would like for financial reasons and other. But when is he going to get the ability to just do things his way? And then we'll be able to judge his effectiveness. I think he's done a tremendous job, especially from a publicity and PR standpoint, just the way he conducts himself in interviews. Like, that guy is sharp. So to that point, it's like one of these two factors is going to have to give. And if Nasser cannot give his full attention to the club like he was at the beginning of this project, Leonardo is the guy. And Tuchel is not his guy. And so something is going to have to give on that front. I wish Tuchel the best. I think he's a great manager. I just don't know if he's the guy that's going to push us over the top.
Yeah, and you can't also forget last season, the couple of dust-ups with Mbappe on the sideline. And it's all about, for me, I know Mbappe is going to leave eventually, but can we get him to extend maybe 2 more years? Maybe a new manager? If Mbappe says, I want my dad manager, whatever it takes.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, to just get Mbappe to sign for a couple more years just to kind of keep us in contention for the Champions League would be great. But I
think you have to show him a project he can believe in.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And he may not love Tuchel, and if he expresses that and says, I'll sign for 2 years, but you got to bring in my guy. I like Pochettino. I like Arsene Wenger, whoever it is that's out there right now. I said on the other podcast, why not go after Zidane? Make him an offer. Give him some percentage points on the on PSG brand. Give him like Jordan clothes or whatever it takes. Like, make him an offer. If that's what it takes.
I mean, to be honest, like Barcelona already hate us, so we might as well get Real Madrid to hate us. I know we're sort of quite good friends with Real Madrid at the moment, and we can maybe it's time to end that friendship. And yeah. But I think it's also worth not getting to, again, like Mbappe and Neymar seemed really happy with Tuchel when we were, getting to the Champions League final like a few weeks ago. So I think it's important not to read too much into sort of, every little thing. Again, this is something with PSG that is always, it was like it before the money came in, and I'm sure it will probably be like it forever. It's always been a sort of a bit of an FC Hollywood club where it goes vies from like, triumph to disaster with no in between. And I think that's something we just need to be careful of as supporters as well, not to get sucked into that sort of hype cycle.
Very well said. So we're coming up on an hour. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. But I wanted to ask you guys, has anyone seen the Amazon video documentary about PSG?
Not yet. I'm going to check it out, though. I mean, it's in French, right? But there'll probably be subtitles.
I don't believe it's available here in the U.S. like Amazon. And I even tried to use a VPN, and I couldn't download it. But, Matt, any luck over there in the U.K. checking it out?
It's not on Amazon, because I saw that it came out the other day. It's not on Amazon UK at the moment, but I think they said it was going to be on all the Amazons. So I think they all will be coming. So I'll be looking forward to seeing it with fairly low expectations of the sort of insight we'll get based on the sort of Man City one and the Spurs one, which is, I don't know if either of you have seen the Spurs one with Mourinho.
I've heard good things about it.
It's sort of, some of it's entertaining, but it's sort of quite stage managed as well. And I think that there's some good like behind the scenes documentaries about football, but they're usually like with smaller clubs that are a bit more tin pot, and usually the sort of big guys can manage it a bit better and make themselves look good. So I suspect that's what happened.
Are you referring to like the Leeds? Don't they have a documentary?
The best one is the Sunderland one, which I'd recommend if no one's seen it. Yes. Sunderland Till I Die, which is so good. They are just absolute. Yeah. It's 2 series of wall-to-wall shambles football club.
In the second season, is that owner still the owner?
No, there's a new one.
He's a new owner. Okay.
Yeah, there's a new one, but the chief executive in the first series is amazing. Like proper sort of like David Brent style from The Office, like giving it all the sort of chat and stuff, and then it's just banter from start.
He was all about like making the music like as loud as possible in the stadium.
Yeah, it was brilliant. So that's a really good one. Hopefully our one will be good as well, but I think it'll probably be probably a bit more of a polished effort than that sort of.
Wouldn't it be amazing if there was like a PSG documentary that was kind of like The Office and it was just ridiculous? Yes. Oh my God, I would pay any amount of money for something like that. Just the ridiculousness of it.
Where they were all like, where Mbappe and Neymar were just like picking on Cazorla all the time because he's like the stupid one, like putting his stuff in the bin or in the things. Yeah, it'd be great. We should definitely do that.
All right. Well, if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at PSG Talk. Let me know who the Dwight Schrute of PSG is. James, how can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at its_JCJ. So know you love, know you hate. I'm there.
And Matt, how can people find you?
I'm on Twitter as well at PSG Tourist. Come and say hello and chat about all things PSG and other stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys. This was a good episode, and we'll do this again soon. Thanks everyone for listening.